My name is Sarah Smith, and at 32 I thought I understood the rhythms of Crossroads Regional Hospital in Millerville, Tennessee. As a registered nurse in the cardiac telemetry unit, I'd spent 6 years learning every beep of the monitors, every shift change protocol, every corner where conversations happened in hushed tones. The hospital felt like a second home, its sterile corridors as familiar as my own hallway. But familiarity, I was learning, could be dangerous. It started with small things. Hannah Martinez, our clinical nurse specialist, had always been meticulous about documentation. She managed the unit's staffing budget and overtime assignments with an attention to detail that bordered on obsessive. Every timesheet, every certification renewal, every continuing education credit, Hannah tracked it all in her color-coded spreadsheets that she guarded like state secrets. "Sarah, did you submit your ACLS renewal paperwork?" she'd ask, appearing at my workstation with that practice smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I need to update the reimbursement database." The reimbursement program was one of Crossroads Regional's selling points. The hospital covered certification costs and continuing education expenses, then processed reimbursements through payroll. It was a generous benefit that kept skilled nurses from jumping ship to competing facilities in Nashville or Memphis. Hannah oversaw the entire process for our unit, from initial approval to final payment. I'd hand over my receipts and certificates, watching as she made careful notes in her leather portfolio. "I'll get this processed within the week," she'd promise, and she always did. The reimbursement would appear on my next paycheck, minus taxes, exactly as expected. But lately, something felt off. It was Victor Harrison from the night shift, who first mentioned it during a particularly quiet Tuesday evening. "Weird thing happened with my BLS recertification," he said, leaning against the nurse's station. "Got the reimbursement, but the amount seemed low. When I checked with payroll, they said Hannah had submitted a different receipt amount than what I actually paid." I paused in my charting. Different how? Lower. Like, significantly lower. When I asked Hannah about it, she said there must have been a clerical error, and she'd look into it. Victor shrugged. Never heard back, though. The conversation stuck with me through the rest of my shift. Hannah had been our CNS for 3 years, promoted from within after demonstrating exceptional organizational skills and clinical knowledge. She had streamlined our unit's operations, reduced overtime costs, and maintained our certification compliance rates at nearly 100%. Administration loved her efficiency reports, but efficiency could hide a multitude of sins. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying closer attention to the small details. The way Hannah's eyes would dart to her computer screen when someone approached her desk. How she'd quickly minimize windows when interrupted during her quote, budget work. The locked filing cabinet that had appeared in her office 6 months ago, replacing the open shelves where she used to store unit documents. "Hannah's been working late a lot lately," observed Catherine Wells, one of our senior nurses, as we prepared for shift change. "Lights in her office are on when I leave at midnight, still on when I come in at 7. "Budget season," I replied automatically, but the explanation felt hollow. The Epic system showed all our certification tracking. But Hannah insisted on maintaining her own parallel records. "Hospital IT is unreliable," she'd explain when questioned. "I need backup documentation for audit purposes." It made sense. Everything Hannah did made sense when viewed individually. It was only when you stepped back and looked at the pattern that the picture became unsettling. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in late October. I was covering for Catherine during her break when Hannah's computer chimed with an incoming email. She wasn't at her desk. I could see her in the supply room through the glass partition, counting inventory with her usual methodical precision. The email preview showed on her unlocked screen, "RE, certification reimbursement discrepancy, audit required." My blood went cold. The sender was from the hospital's internal audit department. Hannah returned moments later, her face composed as always. She glanced at her screen, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her features. Fear? Guilt? It was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Sarah, could you cover the desk for another few minutes?" she asked, her voice steady. "I need to make a quick phone call." I watched her disappear into her office, closing the door behind her. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette pacing back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When she emerged, Hannah's smile was back in place, but something had changed. The air in the unit felt different, charged with an I couldn't name. That night, I lay awake thinking about Victor's missing reimbursement money, about Hannah's locked filing cabinet, about the audit email that had made our unflappable CNS pace her office like a caged animal. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly what Hannah Martinez was hiding. The investigation began with small acts of rebellion disguised as routine work. I started arriving 15 minutes early each morning, using those quiet moments to observe patterns I'd previously overlooked. Hannah's habits were clockwork precise. She unlocked her filing cabinet at exactly 7:45 a.m., retrieved specific folders, then locked it again before the day shift fully arrived. I volunteered for weekend coverage, knowing Hannah rarely came in on Saturdays. The unit felt different without her commanding presence, like a theater with the lights turned up, revealing the mechanics behind the performance. During one of these weekend shifts, I discovered something that made my stomach clench. While updating our certification tracking spreadsheet, I noticed discrepancies in the reimbursement amounts. According to our internal records, my advanced cardiac life support renewal should have generated a $300 reimbursement. But when I cross-referenced it with the hospital's financial system, something I'd never thought to do before, the payment showed as $450. The extra $150 had vanished somewhere between the hospital's payment and my paycheck. I pulled up Victor's records next. His critical care certification renewal showed the same pattern, a $200 discrepancy between what the hospital paid and what he received. Catherine's pediatric advanced life support certification had a $175 gap. My hands trembled as I documented each discrepancy in a private file. Hannah had been skimming our certification reimbursements for months, possibly years. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate detection, but substantial enough to add up to thousands of dollars. The betrayal cut deeper than the money itself. Hannah had positioned herself as our advocate, fighting for our professional development, encouraging us to pursue additional certifications. She'd even helped me prepare for my ACLS exam, staying late to quiz me on algorithms and protocols. Every encouraging word, every supportive gesture had been calculated to increase her own profit. Monday morning arrived with unusual. Hannah seemed distracted, checking her phone repeatedly and glancing toward the administrative offices. The audit email had clearly rattled her more than she'd let on. "Sarah, I need you to handle the certification tracking this week," she announced during our morning huddle. "I'm tied up with budget reviews." This was unprecedented. Hannah never delegated her precious certification records. I accepted the responsibility with carefully neutral enthusiasm, knowing this might be my only chance to access her complete files. The filing cabinet key was in her desk drawer, exactly where I'd suspected. My heart hammered as I unlocked the metal drawers during her lunch break, knowing I had maybe 30 minutes before she returned. The folders were meticulously organized, each staff member's certification history documented in Hannah's precise handwriting. But there were two sets of records for each person, one matching our official hospital files, and another with different amounts, different dates, different reimbursement figures. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. The tertius was overwhelming. Hannah had been systematically falsifying our certification reimbursement claims, reporting higher amounts to the hospital while paying us the standard rates and pocketing the difference. The scope was staggering. Over 18 months, she'd stolen nearly $8,000 from her own staff's professional development funds. I locked the cabinet and returned the key just as Hannah's footsteps echoed in the hallway. She entered with her usual composed smile, but I noticed her eyes immediately dart to the filing cabinet, checking that everything remained undisturbed. "How's the certification tracking going?" she asked, settling at her desk. "Fine," I managed, hoping my voice sounded normal, "just updating the quarterly reports." The rest of the afternoon passed in a surreal haze. I went through the motions of my regular duties while my mind raced with the implications of what I'd discovered. Hannah continued her normal routine, but I caught her watching me with unusual intensity, as if she sensed something had shifted. That evening, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at the photos on my phone. The image was clear, but the path felt treacherous. Hannah wasn't just my supervisor. She was connected throughout the hospital administration, respected by department heads, trusted by the nursing director. Who would believe a staff nurse's word against the clinical nurse specialist who'd built such a sterling reputation? I thought about Victor, still struggling financially, unaware that his missing certification money was funding Hannah's deception. I thought about Catherine, working extra shifts to make ends meet, while Hannah profited from her professional development. The decision crystallized with painful clarity. I couldn't let this continue, regardless of the personal cost. The next morning, I made copies of everything: the photos, my documentation of the discrepancies, a detailed timeline of my observations. I sealed them in an envelope and locked it in my personal locker, then began planning my next move. Hannah seemed increasingly agitated as the week progressed. She made several phone calls behind closed doors, and I noticed her staying late, working on something that required frequent trips to the filing cabinet. On Thursday, my opportunity came in an unexpected form. Diana Walsh from Human Resources appeared in our unit, clipboard in hand, asking to speak with Hannah privately. Through the glass partition, I watched Hannah's composed facade crack slightly as Diana presented what appeared to be official documentation. The audit had begun. When Diana left 20 minutes later, Hannah emerged from her office looking pale but determined. She announced she'd be working from home the next day, handling, quote, administrative responsibilities that required her full attention. I knew this was my chance. Whatever Hannah was planning, she was running out of time to cover her tracks. That night, I made the call that would change everything. I contacted the hospital's ethics hotline, providing my name, my position, and a detailed summary of what I'd discovered. The intake coordinator was professional but thorough, asking specific questions about dates, amounts, and documentation. "We'll need to schedule a formal interview," she explained, "and we'll require all supporting you've gathered." "I have everything," I replied, thinking of the envelope in my locker. "Photos, financial records, timeline documentation." "Good. We'll be in touch within 48 hours to arrange next steps. In the meantime, continue your normal duties but avoid any actions that might alert the subject to the investigation." I hung up feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. There was no going back now. Friday arrived with Hannah conspicuously absent, leaving our unit in a strange state of suspended animation. Victor and Catherine seemed to sense something was wrong, but neither could identify exactly what had changed. I went through my shift mechanically, knowing that somewhere in the administrative offices wheels were turning that would soon reshape all our lives. The call came at 3 p.m. Diana Walsh requested my presence in Human Resources immediately. As I walked through the hospital corridors toward what felt like my professional judgment day, I carried with me the weight of betrayal, the burden of truth, and the fragile hope that justice might actually prevail. The envelope felt heavy in my hands as I knocked on Diana's office door, knowing that whatever happened next, there would be no returning to the comfortable illusion of trust I'd once shared with Hannah Martinez. Diana Walsh's office felt smaller than usual, crowded with the weight of what was about to unfold. She sat behind her desk with the practiced composure of someone who'd handled countless personnel issues, but I could see the gravity of this situation reflected in her careful attention to detail. "Sarah, thank you for coming," she began, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I want you to know that we take these allegations very seriously." I placed the envelope on her desk, my hands steadier than I'd expected. "Everything's documented in there. Financial records, timeline, Photographs of the falsified claims. Diana opened the envelope methodically, spreading the contents across her desk like pieces of a complex puzzle. Her expression remained neutral, but I watched her eyebrows raise slightly as she examined the bank statements showing Hannah's unexplained deposits. "Walk me through this again," she said, pulling out a legal pad. "Start from when you first noticed the discrepancies." For the next hour, I recounted every detail. The missing reimbursement checks, the altered documentation, Hannah's evasive responses when questioned. Diana took notes in precise handwriting, occasionally asking for clarification or requesting specific dates. The certification reimbursement program is managed entirely through Hannah's department, Diana explained. She has administrative access to submit claims, process approvals, and coordinate payments with payroll. That level of access requires absolute trust, which she violated, I said quietly. Diana nodded, closing her notepad. "We'll need to conduct a formal investigation. This will involve our internal audit team, and likely external oversight given the financial nature of these allegations." I need to ask, have you discussed this with anyone else? Only Victor Harrison from our unit. He helped me understand some of the financial documentation. We'll need to interview him as well. Diana leaned slightly. "Sarah, I want you to understand what happens next. Hannah will be placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. There will likely be questions from other staff members. You'll need to maintain confidentiality about the specifics while this process unfolds." The weight of what I'd set in motion settled over me. How long will this take? Thorough investigations require time. Probably several weeks, possibly longer if we need to involve external auditors or law enforcement. Law enforcement. The words hung in the air between us, making the situation feel suddenly more serious than even I had anticipated. Diana stood, gathering the back into the envelope. "You did the right thing, Sarah. I know this wasn't easy." As I walked back to the ICU, the hospital felt different somehow. The familiar sounds of monitors and conversations seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I found Victor at the nurse's station, updating patient charts with his usual methodical precision. "How did it go?" he asked quietly, glancing around to ensure we weren't overheard. "It's out of my hands now," I replied. "Diana said they'll want to interview you too." Victor nodded, his expression serious. "Whatever they need. This kind of thing, it affects all of us. Trust is everything in a place like this." The weekend passed in a strange suspension of normalcy. Hannah's absence was explained as administrative duties, but I could sense the undercurrent of speculation among the staff. Catherine Murphy approached me Saturday evening, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by concern. "Is everything okay with Hannah?" she asked. She seemed stressed lately, and now this sudden schedule change. I chose my words carefully. "I think she's dealing with some administrative issues. Nothing that affects patient care." Catherine nodded, but I could see she wasn't entirely satisfied with my response. The truth was, I wasn't sure how much longer we could maintain the facade of normalcy. Monday brought the first visible signs of the investigation. Two people I didn't recognize appeared in the administrative wing, carrying briefcases and wearing the serious expressions of external auditors. Diana had warned me they might arrive quickly once the formal process began. Hannah remained absent, her office door closed with a temporary "Do Not Enter" sign that seemed to broadcast trouble to anyone who passed by. The rumor mill began churning in earnest, with theories ranging from budget cuts to regulatory violations. Victor found me during lunch break, his expression troubled. "I had my interview this morning," he said. "They asked very specific questions about the reimbursement program, about Hannah's access to financial systems. What did you tell them?" "The truth. About helping you understand the bank statements, about the patterns we identified." He paused, lowering his voice. "Sarah, they asked if I thought Hannah might have done this to other people." The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made terrible sense. If Hannah had been falsifying my claims, what was to stop her from targeting other employees? The scope of potential victims could be much larger than I'd imagined. "Did they give you any indication of timeline?" I asked. "They said the preliminary findings would be available within the week." "But Sarah..." Victor's expression grew more serious. They mentioned that if the allegations are substantiated, this could involve criminal charges. Criminal charges. The words followed me through the rest of my shift, adding weight to every routine task. I'd reported financial misconduct, but I was beginning to understand that I'd potentially uncovered something much more significant. Wednesday brought the breakthrough I'd been both hoping for and dreading. Diana called me to her office again, this time with a different energy, less investigative, more conclusive. "The preliminary audit results are in," she said without preamble. "We found of systematic falsification of certification reimbursement claims affecting multiple employees over the past 18 months. My stomach dropped. Multiple employees? 7 total, including yourself. Hannah Martinez has been systematically redirecting reimbursement payments to accounts she controlled, while providing falsified documentation to the affected employees showing their claims had been denied or delayed." The scope of Hannah's betrayal was staggering. 7 people, 18 months of systematic theft. I thought about my colleagues who might have been affected, wondering how many had simply accepted Hannah's explanations about delayed or denied claims. "What happens now?" I asked. "Hannah has been terminated effective immediately. We're coordinating with law enforcement to pursue criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. All affected employees will receive full restitution, plus interest and compensation for the administrative burden this has caused." Diana handed me a folder containing official documentation of the investigation's findings. "We're also implementing new oversight procedures for the certification reimbursement program. No single individual will have unilateral access to both claim submission and payment processing." As I left Diana's office for what I hoped would be the final time regarding this matter, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. Hannah's betrayal had been even worse than I'd imagined, but justice was finally being served. The news of Hannah's termination spread through the hospital with the speed that only institutional gossip could achieve. By the end of my shift, everyone knew that our trusted clinical nurse specialist had been fired for financial misconduct. Victor found me as I was gathering my things to leave. "I heard about the other victims," he said. 7 people. Can you imagine? I shook my head, still processing the magnitude of Hannah's deception. "All this time, we trusted her completely. She managed our schedules, our professional development, our financial benefits. The investigation team wants to interview all the affected employees," Victor continued. "They're building a comprehensive case for the criminal prosecution." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically my professional world had changed in just a few weeks. The colleague I'd trusted with my career development had systematically stolen from me and 6 others. The comfortable dynamics of our unit would never be the same. But there was also relief. The truth was finally out, justice was being pursued, and systems were being put in place to prevent future exploitation. The betrayal had been devastating, but it was finally over.